The test is in 4-part, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
Hear a student called Joanna telling her friend about an arts festival, which is being held in the city where they are studying. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 and 2. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 and 2.
Hi, Joanna. Where have you been?
Hi, Dave. I had to go into college to return a DVD I'd borrowed from the library.
Oh, right.
But while I was there, I got some information about the City Arts Festival that starts next week.
Oh, yeah? I saw a poster advertising it somewhere.
Yeah, and I picked up this leaflet from the library. It gives you the website address. So as I was there, I logged on to get more information. Actually, although they've got the full programme of events fixed now, you can't book online, which seems strange. There's a number to phone, though.
And are there student discounts?
I guess so, but I didn't notice. Anyway, there are 3 things I'd like to see. An Italian film, a rock concert, and an art exhibition.
Oh.
The exhibition's free, and you don't need to book, so I'll definitely go to that. But I'm going to get tickets for the film in case they sell out.
Good idea. You can always buy concert tickets at the door because that's in a really big hall.
Right.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 3 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 3 to 10.
So, when does the festival actually start?
Well, it's usually held the first week of October, but it's earlier this year for some reason. The opening night is September the 20th, and events go on till the end of the month.
And have you got that phone number?
Yeah, it's here. Look, it's 0967 990 776.
OK, I'll write it down. 0967 990 776. Thanks.
I thought the local council made a profit from the festival, but it says here that there's a commercial sponsor. It's a local bank. I didn't know that.
Neither did I. What other events have they got on?
As well as the art exhibitions and stuff that's open every day, there are special events each day. Like on Monday, there's a musical in the City Hall. That's only £3.65 for students.
I think I'll give that a miss. I've got football training on Mondays, but I'm free on Wednesday.
There's a jazz band on then, and that's only £2.50 for students.
Sounds good. Is that in the City Hall too? We could go.
Well, I'm busy actually. But it's at the sports centre if you're interested.
Oh, right.
Thursday's the cheapest event. Only £1.25 for students. And it's on in the library. Can you guess what it is?
Probably the college choir.
Actually, no. They've not been asked, apparently.
Oh.
No, it's a poetry evening.
Isn't there any modern dance on anywhere?
On Friday. That's at the college. It's quite expensive, though. £15 for adults and £12.75 for students.
Oh, yes, that is a lot. If I'm going to spend that much, I'd prefer to go out on Saturday.
Yeah, me too. But on Saturday night, there isn't live music or a party or anything. Just the fireworks in the city park. And that's only £1.50.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear a lecturer talking to students about a printing process. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
As I've made clear in earlier lectures, many different solutions have been proposed to the basic technological problem of getting meaningful marks onto paper. In other words, several different forms of printing have developed over the years, many of which are still in use today for different purposes. This week, I'd like to discuss the rotogravure process. This is one of the most widely used printing processes, and after describing how the process works, I'll be describing some of its industrial uses and the advantages and disadvantages of this form of printing. As the name implies, rotogravure is a form of printing in which large cylindrical pieces of metal rotate, while the paper to be printed passes between them. The paper is held in place against the printing surface by the impression roller. The weight of this roller is one of the factors that affect how much ink is actually transferred to the paper. Remember that this roller does not directly transfer ink onto the paper. The side in contact with the impression roller remains blank, and it's the other side of the paper which is actually the printed side. The impression roller presses the paper against the ink-bearing roller, generally known as the gravure cylinder. This roller is etched or engraved using either a laser or a diamond-tipped etching machine. This creates a large number of tiny holes in the surface of the roller which hold the ink. The depth and size of these holes determines how much ink is picked up from the ink fountain, which the whole printing assembly rests in. How much ink is picked up, in turn, determines the density of the image produced. As it rotates, the lower roller picks up more ink on its surface than is required, and this needs to be removed before contact with the paper. A flat edge, called the doctor blade, scrapes against the surface and removes all ink which is not in one of the holes on the surface of the lower roller. This should lead to a clean image.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now that we understand a little of the mechanics of rotogravure printing, I'd like to look at it in the wider context of the printing industry and discuss the main uses. One of the main advantages of the rotogravure process is that the amount of ink which can be transferred to the paper is high compared to other printing methods. This means that a broad density range can be produced. In other words, with rotogravure, it's possible to produce many different light and dark shades, making it particularly suitable for reproducing photographs and fine art. For shorter print runs, some other processes may give a finer image, but rotogravure is ideal for jobs that involve printing, for example, 1 million magazines. One common place where you'll see printed matter that has been produced by rotogravure is in the advertising material that is often inserted into Sunday newspapers. Of course, it's not just paper that can be printed by rotogravure. It's a very flexible process, since the rollers used can be made to any size required. Whether it's consumer packaging or large rolls of floor covering that need to be printed, rotogravure is a relatively cheap, quick method that is used in a variety of industries. This isn't to say that rotogravure is without its disadvantages. Probably the main drawback is the fact that, with large areas of colour, the dots are visible, even without using any kind of magnifying aid. Now, does anyone have any questions about the rotogravure process?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear 2 undergraduates doing a research methods course. A girl called Leela and a boy called Jake having a seminar with their tutor. Now you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
So the task I gave you both was to choose an article about a small-scale research project.
Yes.
You were then required to try to reproduce the research procedures in your own context, i.e. try it out for yourselves.
Yeah, and that's what we've done.
Great. So I'd like you to tell me a bit about the article and why you chose it.
Well, the article's written by 2 university lecturers who had started using crosswords to help their students revise terminology for exams.
And the crosswords were designed and set on computers.
And we selected the article because, well, it seemed an accessible topic, even though we weren't familiar with the technique. You know, using IT to design crosswords for higher education.
That's a good reason. So these lecturers wanted to see how well this innovation was received by their students.
Yes.
So how did you go about reproducing the research?
Well, we drew up a list of terms from one of our own modules and designed a crossword for revising these terms.
Then we asked our classmates to try out the crossword and give us feedback, their opinions on how they felt about using the technique.
Was it easy to find participants?
It wasn't easy at first, but then we convinced them that by taking part in the research, they were actually benefiting themselves by preparing for an exam, which is coming up later this term.
And it worked.
Good. So how did you find out what the students thought about doing the crosswords?
A questionnaire. The original article used a 2-page long questionnaire. There were lots of excellent questions on it, but the whole section on difficulties using IT is now obsolete. old-fashioned even though it had only been written a couple of years ago.
So you designed a shorter version?
Yeah. Then we sent it to the 40 students by email and got 28 replies. I was taken aback by the fact that everybody we talked to thought this was a good return. I mean, the responses were well written. You know, people had taken a lot of care, but I was really disappointed with the low numbers.
Yes, an important lesson to learn for an apprentice researcher.
Yeah.
Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So what results did you get?
Well, basically, the responses were extremely positive. The students said that doing the crossword on a computer helped them really focus on the work in hand and not be distracted, which is something that commonly happens with other ways of doing revision.
Yeah, that was really clear. But something that struck me was that having fun hardly featured in their responses, nor did anything to do with spelling of hard words, which I thought would be an obvious benefit.
No? Okay.
Respondents also said that doing the crossword hadn't really increased their general motivation to study, but that it had highlighted the gaps in their memory so they knew what further work was necessary.
Right. So how did your findings tally with those of the original researchers?
There were lots of similarities, but...
There were probably two main differences. We found that more males than females liked the technique, whereas the original study found the reverse.
Also, our respondents said they wouldn't mind doing a crossword as a final official exam, whereas in the original study, students said they would hate doing it even if it meant having a shorter test.
But of course, both sets of respondents said they'd be interested in doing more crosswords for informal purposes, revision, and so forth.
Right. So let's have a think about the whole project and what you've learned from doing it.
Well, it was very time-consuming.
Yeah, and I don't think we managed that aspect very well.
It could have been worse. I mean, we didn't have a lot of data, so we didn't have to spend ages processing it. And of course, we'd already done a course on numerical data processing, so there wasn't much new there.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I think we designed our questions well so that they gave us manageable data.
Yeah, it really helped having the original study to guide us, as it were. And that helped us to see what a good research instrument is.
What a good questionnaire should be like.
Absolutely. We got a lot from that. But when we were writing up the project, I'm not sure whether we'll know how to acknowledge the work of the original study. You know, our referencing.
No, that's something we'll both have to work on in the future.
Actually, that part's been great. Finding ways to share and support another person.
That's the real plus from the project, learning ways to do that.
Well, it's obviously been very successful.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
I'd like to talk about the changes to our leisure time, and I'll start by talking about lifestyle changes over recent years for women.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I'd like to talk about the changes to our leisure time, and I'll start by talking about lifestyle changes over recent years for women. As we all know, the wife and mother of the family has traditionally been responsible for organising and completing household tasks for the family. However, particularly over the last decade or so, we have seen a greater number of women continuing to work after marriage and returning to work after having children. This has significantly reduced the amount of time available for household chores. The result is that nowadays the majority of people own and regularly use products such as dishwashers or microwaves. The modern family often considers hours spent on cleaning and cooking as a waste of valuable time, and generally we are all interested in finding ways of reducing the number of hours we need to devote to such tasks. While washing machines have long been thought of as necessities by families, nowadays so too are microwaves and dishwashers. These goods can drastically reduce the amount of time we need to spend running our home and increase the amount of time available not only to go to work, but also to spend on leisure pursuits. As society develops and we become richer, we put more value on our leisure time and our possessions. The richer a society, the more demanding it becomes. People are no longer happy to work long hours for little return. Expensive holidays, expensive clothes and cars all become more important the more materialistic the society in which we live. Acquiring things and joining the race of acquisition means that modern society spends a lot of time and money purchasing unnecessary goods. Although expensive and persuasive marketing techniques are partly responsible, the demand for such goods often comes from young professionals, those with the money to endlessly upgrade things simply because a better model is made available. Our obsession with the newest and best products available, while good for the economy, can also have a negative impact on the environment. It is not appropriate to overproduce appliances and overuse electricity to keep these unnecessary appliances operating in our homes. We often forget about the damage we have done to and continue to do to the environment. Others opposed to the overuse of appliances and technology also argue that from a social point of view, over-reliance on gadgets means that people are losing the ability to be creative. Traditionally, it was considered an enviable skill to prepare meals night after night for our families. Nowadays, women are more likely to gain approval from others for their success in their careers than their ability in the kitchen. Along with microwaves have come ready-cooked meals, pre-washed vegetables, and our reliance on takeaway food when we are too busy to cook it ourselves. While there are obvious advantages and disadvantages to our increasingly active buying behaviour and changing wants and desires, it is likely that our desire to purchase labour-saving items will continue. So it is therefore inevitable that production of such goods will increase. We can only hope to educate ourselves and our children to buy goods we need, not just goods that are available, and we must also consider their environmental impact. In short, moderation is the most important word for the future. I thank you very much for coming today and listening.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
The video. So this is our question. The following graphs depict the reliability of print and non-print academic materials as voiced by undergraduates and postgraduates at 3 different British universities. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So we are given that the reliability of students on the printed and non-printed material, and they said which is the best in 3 universities: University of Oxford, University of Cambridge, and University of Leeds. So this lighter shade represent the undergraduates and the darker shade present the postgraduate, and this first graph represent the printed material and the second graph represent the non-printed material. So we can say that both the students highly of all the university highly rely on the printed material than non-printed material. So let's have a look how we will answer this. So the rendered bar graphs compares the view of undergraduate and postgraduate students on the reliability of printed and non-printed academic resources at 3 different British universities. So overall it is conspicuous from the graph that students prefer printed material to be more reliable than non-printed material. Now, so we can see that the undergraduate relies more on non-printed and postgraduates feel printed materials more reliable. So what we can see that the undergraduates are the one who relied more on the printed material, and the postgraduates rely more on the non-printed material. So as you can see that the undergraduates more like the non-printed material, whereas the postgraduates like the printed material more than the undergraduates. Now, majority of postgraduates, 90%, 89% and 95% relies on printed information, whereas 80%, 75% and 80% graduates prefer printed resources at the universities of Oxford, Cambridge and Leeds respectively. So what we are just given the numbers that majority of postgraduates, approximately 90 and 85, or we can say 89, and here also 95% rely on the printed material, while they are 80, 75 and 80 in the universities of Oxford, Cambridge and Leeds respectively relies on the printed material. However, the trend is opposite for non-printed material. Non-printed medium, only 59% at Oxford, 62% at Cambridge and 61% at Leeds find non-printed information more upstanding, means reliable. So we can see that only 59% at Oxford and 61% at Cambridge and 60% at Leeds are reliable. 61% at Leeds find non-printed material more upstanding, and though these are undergraduates, so we can write that. So here we can write that undergraduate find non-printed information more upstanding, means more reliable. Instead of if you don't want to write undergraduate, then also it's correct, because we are writing in the next that the ratio of postgraduates, and we know that we are talking about only 2 undergraduates and postgraduates. If we are not talking about that for which information we are saying these percentages, but in the next we are saying that it's for postgraduates, so it's automatically for undergraduates. So the ratio of postgraduate who support non-printed material, means who relies on the non-printed material, are 50% and then 52% and 48% for the same 3 universities respectively, means we are talking about in the same order, and this is 50% and then it is 52 approximately, and here it is 48% because this is less than 50%, so this is approximately 48 we are writing. So this was for today. If you like the video, do hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. I'll meet you in the next video. Till then, bye bye and take care.